Oh, hey. Welcome to this week's episode of Healthy-ish with Nutritionish. Michelle here. Before we dive into today's, God, I can't even speak. Before we dive into today's episode, guys, before we dive in, I wanted to share with you that our signature program at Nutritionish, Eat Right, Live Right, we are having a special because if you live in New York where I live, it is getting warmer finally. All the seasonal depression is leaving all of our bodies. But that being said, summer's around the corner and I want to make sure you guys are looking and feeling your very best. So usually in order to start up with Nutritionish, we have you come in for this one-on-one amazing consultation. We call it designing your roadmap to your own eating philosophy. And you get so much out of this session. Nutrition is not one size fits all, right? And our framework is really designed to create a program for anybody that will be something that fits into their lifestyle, their food preferences, their body type, what their goals are. So when we sit down with somebody for the first time, this is what we start doing. So you walk away with so much. Now that session is usually $49, which is extremely underpriced, but we just kind of do it as a little intro thing just to get people in the door. But because I'm in a good mood, because of all the serotonin from the vitamin D, from the amazing weather, I am giving it to you guys this week for $19 with promo code Nutrish30. So check that out in the show notes. It's going to be gone at some point this week. I'm not sure when. Depends on how long my serotonin lasts. But if you're sick of dieting, but you want to feel good in your clothes this summer, you want to feel confident in your body, you finally want an eating program that's going to work for you long term, look no further. Click the link in the show notes. Use promo code Nutrish, Nutrish 30, all in caps. And you will get that session for $19, which is like basically free. All right, that being said, let's dive into the episode. So this episode was inspired by a little social media post that I did on the scale. And so many people DM me after seeing it and they were like, holy shit, I never thought of the scale like this. And so many of us have these like toxic relationships with the scale where we live and die by that number. Like that number will affect our mood for the day. That number will affect how we eat for the day, good or bad. And the problem is that we don't really understand that number. So by the end of this episode, I really want you to understand the scale and understand how it works, understand what you're looking at when you weigh yourself. I also want you to start thinking of the scale totally differently. The things around nutrition and around weight loss that make you feel bad, it's necessary to have a mindset shift around. And you can have a mindset shift around anything, but I'm going to explain why. A lot of nutrition and a lot of weight loss is psychology. And I think one of the reasons why nutrition and weight loss is not stronger in success and results is because we don't address the mindset piece of it enough. And that's a piece that a lot of people struggle with. So we need to work with the mind, not against the mind. Now, little psychology 101, the brain wants to move towards things that make it feel good and away from things that make it feel bad. So if you're stepping on that scale and it's making you feel bad half of the time, well, half of the time, you're not going to be highly motivated to do well, right? Or sometimes people are the opposite. Sometimes people get motivated when the scale doesn't look good, but then when it looks good, they're like, oh, okay. So you're putting way too much energy into this thing and you're letting it dictate your happiness, but you're also letting it dictate how you're operating around this stuff, right? So we need to make the whole process feel good all the time, which I'm going to get into how to do that. Now, if you're skeptical about that, by the end of this episode, you're going to feel very differently, but I'm going to use a quick example just to kind of like get you thinking about it, right? So I had a client come in once and she was leaving my office and she was putting on her jacket. So while she was putting on her jacket, she was like, ow, like she was like hurting herself. So I was like, what happened? She's like, oh, nothing, I'm just sore. She's like, I worked out yesterday, so I'm a little sore today. She's like, but I love that feeling. So I was like, that's interesting. I was like, how come you love that feeling? She's like, well, because when I'm sore after I've been to the gym the day before, she's like, it means that like I did something. It means that my muscles are growing. It means I'm getting stronger. She's like, I love that feeling. And I'm like, that's interesting because you're feeling like physical pain, right? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, but you've trained your brain to associate it with something positive. So physical pain, you've associated to something that makes you feel good. And she was like, yeah, I guess so. So if people can do that with physical pain, right? Associating it to something that makes you feel good, you can do it with anything. And I'm going to teach you how to do it with the scale. Because the same person could feel sore the next day and be like, oh my God, I hate this feeling. I'm never going to the gym again. But instead, she trained herself to associate that feeling with strength and growth and progress. And because of that, she loved it. And because of that, she's making the gym more of a habit, right? So it is so important that all of the pieces of this puzzle for you for weight loss and nutrition feel good because it works with the brain and it works with psychology. So let's break down how you can do this when it comes to the scale. So the first thing, and you probably will know this already, but just to recap, it's important to know if you have an unhealthy relationship with the scale, because sometimes it's even difficult to recognize. Sometimes you might recognize it as normal because you've been doing it for so long. So an unhealthy relationship with the scale looks like you have an emotional reaction to the number. So when it goes up, it makes you feel bad. When it goes down even, it makes you feel good. You want to kind of be neutral, ideally, to that number. And you just want to look at it as like data to show you what you need to do as far as your eating habits go, which I'm going to elaborate more on that in a second. But if you have a strong emotional attachment to seeing the scale go up or down, that's one sign that you might have an unhealthy relationship with it. The second sign, and this one's a little obvious, but people still do it, if you weigh yourself a lot. I'm talking about, a lot to me is more than once a week, right? And I'll explain why you don't really need to do it more than once a week in the first place. But I'm talking like more than once a week. I'm talking daily. I'm talking if you're doing it more than once a day. There are people that are doing it more than once a day. It definitely means that you're having a difficult relationship with the scale. So those are the two things. If you're doing it constantly all the time, probably more than once a week, it's a little unhealthy, a little toxic. And then definitely if you have an emotional attachment to the direction that it's going in, or if you have an emotional attachment to a specific number. So to me, when somebody comes in and I'm like, all right, what are your goals? And they're like, I want to be 133. Not 135, not 130, like 133, like a very specific number, because you have an emotional attachment to that number. Because the reality is, guys, no one's going to know the difference if you're 135, 133, 130, probably even 137. But like, we have these like specific numbers in mind sometimes, which means you probably have a little bit of an unhealthy relationship with the scale. So those are kind of like 2 to 3 signs that this podcast episode is for you. So here's a couple of realities about the scale that you need to understand to start to have a healthier relationship with it and make yourself feel good around the scale, so that it's not something that's sabotaging you and you can focus on your habits, which is the important part when it comes to weight loss and nutrition. So the first thing that you want to understand about the scale is that it doesn't always reflect in real time. The scale is very similar to the stock market, meaning you have things in your body that are part of your weight that are fluctuating. When we're talking about weight loss, true weight loss, what we're really talking about is fat loss. The problem is that when you're stepping on a scale, the scale doesn't break down the like water, muscle, fat. Some scales do, but like not necessarily well, or in a way that's like easy for the consumer to read. So what's going on is you're just looking at the number going up or down, not realizing that there are parts of that weight that are water weight that are going to fluctuate every day. Or if you wear clothes, different clothing, or if you ate food, if it's been digested the night before or something like that. So there's so many factors that don't contribute to our body composition and don't contribute to our size that could be reflected on the scale, and they fluctuate. Now, fat does not fluctuate, but water, food, clothing, that kind of stuff can fluctuate day to day and does fluctuate day to day. So here's the thing about fat loss. Fat loss takes about 6 to 8 days to see. There are 3,500 calories in a pound of fat, so it is impossible to gain or lose a pound of fat in a day, 2 days, 3 days. For most people, it takes a minimum of 6 days, usually closer to 7 or 8 days to see that, right? So even if you got on the scale tomorrow and you lost a pound, or you got on the scale tomorrow and you gained a pound, you didn't really lose a pound, you didn't really gain a pound, you're looking at water fluctuations. But it's so easy to get on the scale and see a number and have an emotional reaction to it. So I compare it to looking at the stock market hour by hour. So if I'm looking at the stock market hour by hour, let's say I bought a stock that was $24, right? And then I look an hour later and it's 25, and then I look 2 hours later and it's 22, and then I look a couple hours later and it's $28.50, and then it's 20. Like, I'm like, oh my God, I lost money, I gained money, I lost money, I gained money. I'm going to drive myself absolutely freaking crazy, right? But if I look at the trends over time, in the stock market, for example, let's say I look once a month and I'm like, okay, this month the stock went from $20 to $25. Okay, great. I gained $5, whatever. But you have to look at the trends over time. If you're looking closely or you're looking day to day, you don't even know if you lost money or gained money because you're looking too closely. When it comes to weight loss, just like the stock market is not linear, it fluctuates with an overall trend in a certain direction. Weight does the same thing. So this is what weight loss will look like for somebody losing weight, this is what their weight loss could look like over the course of 7 days. So I'm just going to use random numbers, but this is what somebody who is losing weight, this is what the day-to-day fluctuations can look like for somebody who's actually losing weight. So day 1, I'm just going to make up numbers. Day 1, let's say they weigh 150. Day 2, let's say they weigh 150. Day 3, 152. Day 4, 149. Day 5, 150. Day 6, 149.5. Day 7, 148.9. So if I'm looking at day 1 and day 7, right, it looks like they lost 1.2 pounds, which is perfectly textbook perfect weight loss in a week, let's just say, right? Again, 3,500 calories and a pound of fat. But if they're looking too closely, they could have sabotaged themselves already, because maybe like day 2 to day 3, when they went from 150 to 152, like let's say they went out to eat and they had a lot of salt that night, because when you go out to eat, that has a lot of sodium, and they see their weight spike up 2 pounds, they could have given up already. They could have gotten frustrated and been like, but I ordered the healthiest thing on the menu. But anytime you go out to eat, it's inevitable when you are the next day, your weight's going to be slightly up, not because you did anything bad, not because you gained fat, but because of the water retention from the sodium that's going to be in your system for about 24 hours after that. That could just mess with your head and totally sabotage you, right? But then the next day, it looks like she lost the water weight. It was down to 149. So she's like, oh, great, I lost a pound. But then again, it fluctuated back up to 150, 149.5, 158.9. So if I'm looking at day 1 to day 7, we see the weight loss. But if I'm looking at all of these fluctuation numbers in between every single day, I don't know if I'm gaining weight. I don't know if I'm losing weight. I'm going to get so confused. I've had clients do this. I've had clients say to me, oh my God, I didn't lose any weight this week, or oh my God, I gained weight this week. And it's because they're comparing numbers day to day. They're comparing these water fluctuations, but when I'm looking at my chart a week to a week, that they lose. So you need to understand that there's an overall direction of the scale, right? But then within that general direction, there's going to be micro fluctuations. Those micro fluctuations are what's messing with your head. So I highly recommend not weighing yourself every day, especially if it messes with your head, just because all you're looking at is water fluctuations. So that was the first thing, is I think it's really important that you understand the scale and you understand that the weight you're looking at is not just made up of body fat. To lose body fat, which is what we're trying to lose, that's what's going to make you lean. That's what's going to make your size different. That's what we want you to lose. That takes about 6 to 8 days, give or take. And when you're weighing yourself every single day, though, you're looking at water fluctuations, which are totally normal. And that example that I gave you, that's what somebody who's actually losing weight, that's what those day-to-day fluctuations might look like. But if you let the scale affect you, the second you see it spike up because maybe you're retaining water for whatever reason, that could totally mess with your head. You could easily give up, or you can, feel discouraged or make yourself feel bad, which, as we said in the beginning of the episode, when your brain feels bad, it wants to move away from those things. So you're more likely to give up. Okay, so I'm going to get into this social media post and what we were talking about and why so many people found it helpful. Before I do, I want you to, so I'm going to get into how to have the mindset shift. That's what the social media post was about. But first, I'm going to get into what the mindset shift is. I want you to start to not have an emotional reaction to the number. And I'm going to get into how to do that in a second. But before, I'm going to get into what I want you to start thinking instead. So right now, if it goes up, you're upset, it affects you. If it goes down, you think that's great, you're happy. Or sometimes you feel like, oh, well, I can get away with X, Y, and Z. Either way, you're motivated by the symptom. You're not motivated by the habits that are going to get you there. So the whole idea is I want you to take all this energy that you're putting into the scale and put it into your habits, because the weight at the end of the day should just be a reflection of your eating habits. Now, of course, there are exceptions. There are times where people, God forbid, get sick and are losing weight, or maybe they're doing weird things and they're starving themselves. Like, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people making positive changes to their eating habits, and their weight is going in a positive direction as a result of that. So weight is a symptom, not a problem. I want you to take all the energy you're putting into stressing about the symptom and putting it into the problem, which is your eating habits. So if we can pretend like the number doesn't exist and just look at the direction that it's going in, here's the way I want you to start thinking about it, and then I'm going to get into the how. If the scale goes up over time, not day to day, but over time you see the number on the scale going up, that just means however you're eating right now, you have to eat a little bit better. If the number over time is staying the same and you would like it to go down, it means you have to just make your eating habits slightly better. If over time you're noticing your weight is going down, whatever your eating habits are good enough. And that just means that, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Now, if over time you lose 10, 20, 30 pounds and then however you're eating, it plateaus or it stops. That just means your body's used to it and you have to make the next level of changes. And that's what we help people do at Nutrishmish. We kind of look at what their eating habits are right now, and there's a million strings we can pull. So we get to know the person, we get to know their lifestyle, what they like to do, what kind of foods they like. We fix the root of the problem, be it emotional eating, planning, whatever their issues are, but then we pull the strings that they care about the least. So that way it's something they can stick to and they can still live their life. Now you could do this on your own just by kind of analyzing your eating habits, analyzing the direction that the scale is going in and making some adjustments. But if it's something where you want it to be expedited, or you want, someone to kind of like help you and guide you and tell you what to do and hold you accountable, that's what we do. And I would highly recommend taking advantage of that session in the show notes that I was talking about earlier. But this is something that you can do on your own just by kind of monitoring your eating habits, monitoring your weight over time, and then just looking at the direction as a guide to tell you, is what I'm doing good? Do I have to amp it up a little bit, or do I have to amp it up a lot? Now, if you're like, that sounds great, but every time I look at it, the scale gets above a certain number, I get really emotional, I get really upset, or if I see this number, I get really excited or really happy. How do I not have an emotional reaction to it? This is the mindset shift I want you to have. And this is what I was talking about in the social media post. Weight is, for the most part, a reflection of your eating habits. We can say the same thing for cholesterol, for blood pressure, for blood sugar, for any of those symptoms. They're all just symptoms, right? So when we fix our eating habits, all of the symptoms associated with it will get better. So I really feel bad, and I hate when you go to the doctor and the doctor notices your blood sugar is high. And he's like, well, you really should lose weight. It's not what they should say to people. They shouldn't say you really should lose weight, because losing weight or chasing number on the scale is not always correlated with getting healthier, and it's not always correlated with your blood sugar going down. If you change your eating habits, that is correlated with your blood sugar improving as well as your weight improving. So again, they're not really getting to they're kind of promoting this message of managing a symptom instead of addressing a problem. So here's the example that I gave somebody. I said, okay, let's say you went to the doctor and your doctor was like, hey, your cholesterol is 250 points. Would you be upset about that? And her answer was, I have no idea. I don't even know if that's good or not, which most people don't. So I was like, okay, what if your doctor said that that was high? What would you do? She's like, well, I probably would just like fix my eating habits. And then if I did the right thing in a couple months when I went back, my cholesterol would probably be down. And I was like, okay, interesting. I was like, would you go to your doctor every day demanding blood work, being like, check me, check me, check me? She's like, no, that would be crazy. I was like, all right, so you would just trust by changing your eating habits over 3 months that you would see the number go down? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, so that's interesting, because we can, again, correlate that to the scale. You're getting on the scale every single day, right? But you're saying that, okay, if I change my eating habits over time, I'll trust that my cholesterol goes down. But for some reason, you're not feeling the same about the weight. Obviously, we can't get blood work done every single day. It's a lot easier to hop on the scale, but it's the exact same concept. So then I said to her, okay, so let's say you go back to the doctor in 3 months and the doctor says, okay, your cholesterol is now 220. I said, are you going to be happy with that? And she's like, yeah, it's lower. That's great. I was like, are you going to be upset that it's not 218.5? And she's like, no, like, why would I be? She's like, it's lower. So, I mean, I guess that's better. That means that my eating habits got better. And she's like, who cares if it's 218.5 or 220? And I was like, exactly. It is the same thing with the scale. So when you start thinking about the scale and your weight as an overall reflection of your habits over time, and you stop getting hung up on the day-to-day fluctuations, and then instead of having an emotional reaction to the number, you just kind of use that as data to know if the way you're eating is good or if you need to make some minor improvements. It's A, so much healthier. B, it's going to make your brain feel good. It's going to make your brain happy. It's going to take that sadness away that you could feel when you step on the scale all the time, which again, from a psychological point of view, your brain's trying to move towards things that make it feel good and away from things that make it feel bad. So now you're working with the psychology of your brain to actually stick to improving your eating habits long term. And again, you're weighing yourself every day. You're looking at fluctuations as like the stock market, right? I think it's the best thing to do is look at it exactly like you would look at any other symptom associated with your eating habits, your cholesterol, your blood pressure, your blood sugar. You wouldn't have an emotional reaction to whatever the number is. To be honest, you wouldn't even know if like it was good or bad in a lot of cases unless the doctor told you. The reason that you have a meaning to the number is because you've assigned it when you were younger, or a parent assigned it to you when you were younger, or something like that. Usually it's around some kind of like almost like trauma when it comes to like how you were feeling about weight at one point. But if you can kind of like, the nice thing is if you've assigned a meaning to it, you can take that meaning back. Because again, you don't have a meaning assigned to 250 for your cholesterol, right? So you can also unassign the meaning that you're putting behind the weight, which is super important to make this whole process feel good. So, just to recap real fast. If you have an unhealthy relationship with the scale, you find yourself you're weighing yourself often, and not only weighing yourself often meaning more than once a week, your emotions are very tied into that number. You might want to see a very specific number on the scale, or if it goes up or down, you have a strong emotional reaction to it. The ideal way is you just kind of look at that as data, right? And then you kind of make adjustments based on that data. If it's going up over time, you say, okay, I got to make it a little bit better. If it's staying the same, you're like, okay, I just have to make a couple little changes here. And then if it's kind of going down in the right direction, or the direction that you want it to go in, it probably means that, whatever habit changes you're making are enough. And, like I said before, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Just use the direction of the scale to guide you as to what to do. The reality of the scale is you're going to look at water fluctuations day to day. It takes about, 6 to 8 days to see body fat loss happening. So again, if you're weighing yourself every day, you're not even looking at significant weight loss. You're just looking at fluctuations day to day. And there are things in our diets that will make our water weight fluctuate day to day, which doesn't affect our size or anything like that, but it does affect the weight. Again, I gave that example of what weight loss looks like on a daily basis. If you're weighing yourself every day, there are those fluctuations. And if you let those affect you, it's so easy to feel bad. And if you feel bad, your brain's going to want to give up. And that happens to a lot of people. So the mindset shift that you want to have around it is the scale is a barometer. It just tells me based on the direction what I have to do with my eating habits over time. And if you do that, it's going to be such a game changer for you. And it's going to make this whole process feel so much better. So I hope that was helpful. If it was, let me know. Make sure you're following me on social media. Instagram, I'm at Mish of Nutrishmish. That's MISHOF. NUTRISHMISH. Slide into my DMs. Let me know what you thought of this episode. Share it with a friend if you think it's helpful. Obviously, make sure you're subscribed. If you want to rate us 5 stars, I would totally appreciate it. Make sure you check back next week for our new episode of Healthy-ish with Nutrishmish. And make sure if any of this resonated with you, if you struggle with your relationship with the scale, or you just want to figure out what your personal eating philosophy looks like, please take advantage of that session. Like I said, it's $49 usually to start, which is just a nice little intro offer. It's super inexpensive to begin with. But like I said, because of the beautiful weather and the vitamin D and the dopamine, I'm going to give it to you guys for $19 with promo code NUTRISH30. That's NUTRISH30. Check it out in the show notes. Take advantage of it because I don't know how long this is going to last. Have a great week, and I will check you guys out next time.